Recently, a lot of people have been asking us what happened to our tiny house and our campulance in the United States. Well, take a seat because we have a story to tell you. As many of you know, back in 2017, we teamed up with Mike from Tiny House Chattanooga to build our little Zen tiny house on wheels. The idea for this tiny house was that it would be a super compact, ultra portable tiny house that would be amazing for us to travel all over North America in. The house was absolutely beautiful, and both Rasa and I really loved our time in it. That first year that we had the tiny house, we rented a Ford truck which we used to tow our tiny house all through Georgia, all through the southern states, to Texas, to Florida, where we attended tiny house festivals and showed the tiny house off to people, while actually getting to live the dream life on the road in our tiny house, which we thoroughly enjoyed. I've now got the tiny house in tow. So far we've traveled about 500 miles in the tiny house, which I think is a really cool little milestone. Obviously this one is going to be covering a lot more in its lifetime. We then left America to come back to New Zealand for the summer, and then next year we were going to start our tiny house travels all over again. But renting a truck for the whole period we were over there was turning out to be really expensive, so we thought that we would buy something to make it a little bit easier. Fortunately, at the time, my auntie worked for an ambulance department in Missouri, and they were retiring a beautiful old Chevy C4500X ambulance that we thought would be absolutely perfect for our travels. And it was an affordable vehicle for us, so we were really, really excited about it. Plus, it was an ambulance that had flashing lights and air horns and all of that fun stuff, so I just couldn't say no to it. So we bought the ambulance, we installed a tow package so that we were able to hitch up the tiny house, and before we went to pick up the tiny house, we did a few road trips just in the ambulance, and we had an absolute blast. We had chucked an inflatable mattress in the back, and even just traveling in the ambulance, it was really amazing. Mike had been finishing up a few things on the house in Tennessee while we were still in New Zealand, so after we had traveled around a little bit, we traveled to Tennessee to hitch up the tiny house, and we started on our 600-mile or 1,000-kilometer trip back to my auntie's place in Missouri, where the plan was to rest up for a little while before we took the house on the road and started our travels. And this is where our problems began. We made it about as far as Kentucky when all of a sudden the ambulance just started throwing all of its toys out of the cot. We started getting warning lights, the ambulance went into limp mode, I managed to pull it off of the interstate, and we were at an off-ramp when all of a sudden the ambulance just died. Before leaving on this trip, we took our Campulance in to get a full service so that everything was in top condition, and not even 6 hours into our road trip, we have completely broken down. I have absolutely no idea what's going on. We just pulled off of the interstate, and here at the traffic lights, we've died. Can't get her started again. We've got a towing company on the way, and we have found a diesel mechanic who's about 3 miles from here. But honestly, right now I'm feeling super deflated. You know, when you break down, you're in a huge vehicle like this, you're towing a tiny house on wheels, everything just becomes so much more complicated, and I was so looking forward to this road trip, and I'm definitely feeling a little bit heartbroken right now. Hey, fingers crossed this here is our towing guy.
I got somebody else coming with another vehicle. Okay. And they're gonna hook up to your trailer.
Okay.
And I can pick this one up and load it on your on the rollback.
Okay, great.
Sounds good?
Okay, sounds good.
All right.
Thankfully, we've managed to find a tow truck company that is actually able to hook up the ambulance, and then they're sending out a second vehicle to hook up the tiny house, and we're gonna get towed to a mechanic. So that's a small positive at least. But it's a good opportunity to practice non-attachment, a little bit of Zen in an extreme circumstance, and it's just life. So we pull up to this diesel mechanic who was in very, very rural Kentucky, and he was just the sweetest guy. He said it was no problem for us to stay the night in our tiny house and stay on site while our truck got fixed up in the morning. And the benefit to breaking down with a tiny house, even though it has a lot more complications, is no need to find a hotel. Gotta find positives where you can. The next morning, we had the truck fixed up and we hit the road. Thank you so much for everything. I really appreciate all your help.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Have a trip.
We'll see you around.
Be safe.
Gotta be careful. So we are back on the road. This time around it looks like it was an engine temperature sensor that was faulty, and that was causing the vehicle just to stop and not start again. So fingers crossed, this time around we're gonna make it. Or so we thought. We've traveled now about 100 miles out of where the mechanic stop was, and our warning light has come back on again. I'm really hoping that this time we don't lose power. We're on the back roads, which doesn't help either. We actually don't have any cell service, so if anything does happen, I have no idea what I'm gonna do. I think we maybe made it another couple of hours on the road. Before we knew it, we were back broken down, this time at a gas station. Fortunately, we were at a gas station and not blocking the off-ramp of an interstate.
That ain't good.
It's not good.
That ain't good.
It is not. That's what I was worried about. And I don't even know, maybe I shouldn't have reset the computer yet. Before we knew it, we had people coming out of the gas station and even out of their cars who had stopped to get gas, and they were climbing into the hood of our truck trying to help us get back on the road, which was really cool of them.
You have nowhere to go to until the morning time after 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
Because this place shuts down after 8.
Well, we're heading to the I-57. We're heading to Missouri, so we're hopefully going to hit the interstate soon.
Yeah, you're not very
bridge
far.
is like
Follow this down. You'll come to
20
a T,
minutes
go
that
west.
way. That's about it.
Follow the T.
All right, thank you very much. And from there, we managed to get all the way back to our home in Missouri. One of the tricky things is, though, that when we are on the road filming, we tend to keep to really tight schedules. And we were really worried that there was something potentially wrong with the tow package, or there was something going on with towing the tiny house that the ambulance didn't like and was giving us mechanical troubles for. So we did decide on that trip to leave our tiny house in Missouri and just continue the rest of that road trip with the ambulance. And it was fantastic. We made it all the way to California and right the way up into Washington before traveling back to Missouri and flying back home to New Zealand. We were already no strangers to breaking down. Before the ambulance, before building the tiny house, we had bought a Volvo XC90 in Canada, which we called the Spirit Bear. And that was what we were traveling around in before we did the tiny house build in 2017. And again there, we bought a very troublesome vehicle. So now we're just waiting for our friend to come pick us up. We're stranded in Duncan. Car has just totally given up on us. And so that has to actually be towed all the way to Victoria now because it's the only Volvo dealer on the island. All fun and games. I think the computer on that one was on the brink, and even though the car drove great, every now and then all of the electrical systems in the car would just die. It's now about 6 o'clock in the morning. We are traveling from Bend, Oregon, and we're trying to get as close to Fort Collins, Colorado as we can. So it's a mammoth drive. I think it's about 15 hours. We're probably going to stop the night somewhere in between. But the Spirit Bear has been giving us some troubles again. Last time on the way down, we actually had 4 electrical failures. So we're hitting the road regardless, and we're just going to see how far we can get. Fingers crossed we make it. So it has done it again. We have just lost all of the power on my instrument panel. And unfortunately indicators and everything else goes as well. So I have to pull over. And sometimes, because it's just a computer error, if I restart the computer, it works. So let's just give it a try. Just like that, back up and running. So that's not too bad. This time we were lucky. Only another 800 kilometers to go. So already before the ambulance, I was kind of at my wit's end when it came to cars with mechanical problems. The ambulance then stayed at my auntie's place for about 6 months until we managed to get back to the United States to begin a whole new tour. When we got back to America, we pushed on with the ambulance because we really wanted to make it work. But time and time again, we just ended up right back in the same place. Well, we are in Fort Worth, Texas, where we have just broken down yet again. So this is already the third time that we've broken down just in the last few weeks. I don't know if it's a ghost in the machine or what, but it's super, super frustrating. Yeah, I guess I'm just gonna call another tow truck and yeah, try to get to a mechanic. You don't know anyone that wants to buy one of these things, do you?
No.
I figure at least if we can get to Austin, then we can film a couple of the tours that we've got planned there. And then I guess we try to get the truck back to Missouri, maybe fly to California and then rent a vehicle after that. The show must go on. In the end, we just got really tired of all of the constant mechanical problems, and ultimately we had a job to do. We were there to film a show, and the ambulance and all of the mechanical problems that came with it were just unfortunately slowing us down too much. After leaving the mechanic in Texas, we limped back home to Missouri, where we ended up selling the ambulance cheap, renting a car, and continuing the rest of our travels that way. One thing that I do really want to say is that for me, one of the really positive experiences to come out of breaking down all across North America is that it has taught me a lot about the innate kindness of people. We had complete strangers wherever we broke down come to lend us a hand, offer us whatever knowledge they could. We had people tear their pants climbing into the hood of the truck trying to get us back on the road.
How much the damn diesel injectors? Shit, you can't hardly get to them, can you?
And I am just so thankful and so grateful to each and every one of those people. And it really did give me this feeling like people are good. And that's just a lovely thing to know. We had every intention of keeping our tiny house because we love spending time in America, and because so many of our wonderful audience are in America, we had intended on traveling back every year to always create local tiny house content. Except then COVID happened, and it's now coming up on the 2-year anniversary since we were last in America, which is really sad because we miss our travels and our time over there. We miss my auntie and uncle over there, and we would love to be able to spend more time in America again. But as a result of that, our tiny house was just stuck there in Missouri. My auntie ended up selling her house and moving to Florida, which meant that there was nowhere for the tiny house to really go, and I was looking at maybe putting it into storage, but then it just wouldn't have been looked after. And so Rasa and I made the really tough decision to sell our tiny house in America. Fortunately, I am so thrilled with where the tiny house has gone. We sold it to our friends Pam and Bruce, who run the Tiny Digs Hotel in Portland, which was just the absolute best solution for us because firstly, it means that we still get to visit our tiny house when we do travel back to America. But also we were really excited about our tiny house being a rental at Tiny Digs because it means that you can go and stay there if you want. And I really like that idea that fans of the show and people that followed the story of our tiny house build can now get to go and experience a night in the tiny house themselves. I'm just so happy with how that worked out. So that is the story of what happened to our Campulance and our tiny house in North America. It is certainly not the ending that we had hoped for, but all being said and done, it was still an adventure. At one point in time, Rasa and I were starting to think that we would have to create a whole new show just about the little towns that we broke down in all across North America. So I hope that you've enjoyed this part of our adventure, and we look forward to sharing lots more with you again in the future. I'd like to say a huge thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring this video and helping to support our channel. Chances are, this year you've been spending a little bit more time at home and have had a little bit more time on your hands. And for me, one of the things that I really love to do when I have spare time is to learn something new. And so Skillshare for me is such a wonderful website and resource. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of inspiring classes for creators. You can explore new skills and deepen your existing passions, getting lost in creativity. I love plants, I love gardening, and I've been taking this opportunity to do a course which is all about indoor gardening, growing houseplants, veggies, and herbs. This is a course by Hector Chaudry. One of the things that I really enjoy about Skillshare is the huge amount of variety of things that you can learn. Whether you want to learn to be better at Instagram, design your own website, learn how to use SketchUp to design your own tiny house, whatever it is that you want to learn, chances are there is a Skillshare course waiting for you. The first 1,000 of my subscribers to click the link in the description of this video will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare so that you can get your learning journey started. So click the link in the description of this video and start learning a new skill today.